So hello everyone, this is Joyce Graff. I'm the District Governor-elect of District 7910, and we're delighted to have you here with us. We hope you'll join us for this and many other training videos that we're working on to try to help make sure you get the information you need to be successful in your first year as president. And with me is my co-host, Mary. And Mary is the new president of the Westford Rotary Club. She is going to be co-hosting with me today, Mary Foerster. Hi, Mary. How are you?
Hello, hello. Happy to be back.
And our special guest today is Susan Wilkinson, who is the recent president of the Rotary Club of Nashoba Valley. And she is going to talk with us today about the work that she's done with that club. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Joyce. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. So would you give us a little bit of background how when you first came to be the president of the club, what experience did you bring that prepared you for this, or did you feel like you just got thrown in the lake?
The word that I like to use, and someone pointed this out recently, that I'm very good at transitions. I'm one of those, in terms of my leadership style, I tend to be a back-end leader, like kind of a servant leader in a way. And in terms of preparation, I was lucky to shadow the president, who was Glenn before me. And I made it an effort to work closely with him. So the way we also split it in our club is that the president-elect is also the speaker chair.
Uh-huh.
So you get to at least understand what it takes to reach out and bring people into the club to speak, but also the speaker chair role is involved in that, just even soliciting suggestions from the club members itself helps you to open up and build relationships. And I think also beyond that, being on the board as well helped me to understand the back end of the club in terms of budgeting, in terms of the community service projects that we had. So I felt like coming into it, I didn't feel like it was brand new to me. I felt prepared. That said, you're never too prepared and you're never 100% prepared. So I came in with an open mind and just open to learn, and as well as open to lead, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Could you give us a little background on the club itself? How old or new is the Rotary Club of Nashoba Valley, and how big?
Absolutely. So the club has been around, so please don't quote me on this, but I think it's been around for more than 10 years for sure. It was founded by 3 or 4 members, and they deemed it fit that we do need a club in the area that brought together the 3 towns, Stowe, Bolton, as well as Lancaster. So unlike most of the clubs, 1-town clubs, we are a 3-town club altogether to cover that, hence the name, Rotary Club of Nashoba Valley. So
and when and where do you meet?
So that has been in transition.
Okay.
And again, speaking of transition, so right out of the pandemic, we went back to where we used to meet, which was Emma's Cafe in Stowe. But shortly after return to in-person visits, we got an abrupt email notifying us that Emma's Cafe is closed. No warning, but I mean, they had their own reasons. So again, having members that are really invested in their communities is very, very important, because one of our members, Mr. Johnson, Bob Johnson, was very quick to leverage the connections he has with the historical society in town, as well as the previous town hall, and requested that we meet there. So that is the Horton Hall, which is on Main Street, 117. And initially it was thought to be something temporary as we try to look for a place that can accommodate all three towns in terms of people driving in. That said, it later on became clear that we really don't have much around there. That's where
And you all meet for breakfast, is it?
Yes, we all meet for breakfast. Our meetings, we arrive by 7:15. If you are in charge of bringing breakfast, definitely you get there early so that you set up. And again, part of losing out on Emma's Cafe, where we just walked in, here we bring our own breakfast. And
Right.
Mr. Johnson is always there to set up for the Zoom for people who do hybrid. And by 7:30, oftentimes we are going for the meetings.
How many
Great.
members?
For now, we've had a steep attrition rate. So right now, we've also gained 4 members in the process. So we are now right up to 23 members.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Very good. And your club was founded as a breakfast club, right? It wasn't a change for the club. It was the intention from the beginning.
From my understanding, they've always done breakfast.
So how did you go about defining the goals that were going to shape your year ahead?
That is another big question. I would have loved to build off of what my predecessor had already started. Ideally, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. That's a waste of resources. However, we had so many changes and rapid ones and really trajectory changing kind of situations whereby perhaps the goals that worked the previous year were no longer applicable to this year. So that in itself gave us an opportunity to pivot and pretty much restructure the club from the ground up, building on to the positives that we found there, but also changing the things that did not help the club grow. So right away, my goal was, okay, the club cannot be run by 3 people.
Right.
We all need to know what goes on in the club and in the back end. Clearly right now, the fear of people stepping into leadership roles is actually valid. If you don't know what you're stepping into, it's fair to feel uncomfortable. But if you had an idea of what you're stepping into, it's a lot easier to even just picture yourself in that role. So right away, I made it clear that we are all going to get involved, including myself. There is no more warming up the chairs and showing whenever you can. And true to form, the members really rose to the challenge. We have seen people who were previously a little bit timid or not so sure, just jump in and take up roles that previously probably people would ask them and they were like, no. But again, also, I made it a point to bear my vulnerabilities as a leader. In other words, if I can do this, you can do it too. And you know what? Picking into my nursing background, if no one dies, we can fix everything. So there is no reason to fear leadership roles. So to me, that was my number one goal, is to make sure that everyone in the club has a somewhat good understanding of the machine, the back end of the machine. In the event something happens, people can just jump in and assume roles as we need to. So that was role number 1. And then goal number 2 was building a succession plan and a playbook that we can pass on to each other. And each president is free to add on per their experience and just keep having a warm handoff as we went along. And I think if you talk to Chris today, and she would have been here, but she wasn't able to, she would tell you that her and I working closely together in terms of that warm handoff, in terms of that succession plan, really made it so much easier for her in terms of really assuming office as we are right now. And her and I sat down and said, okay, this did not work. Clearly, this worked. It's up to you. This is now your presidency. You get to shape the club in the way that you deem fit, of course, with our RI's objectives. But I would love to say that right now we are in the position whereby even our newest members feel comfortable jumping into roles that previously people would have found quite intimidating.
So they're engaged. You feel like you're engaging everybody. Was it very top heavy before, where it was kind of, everything was decided to the top and people did or did not participate?
So people participated. On the other hand, too, we had members that were very good at doing. And hey, you know what? If I'm in a club where 2 or 3 members are willing to really,
Yes.
to really take up that,
Yeah.
I would be okay. I did it for 2 years. I just sat back and just enjoyed the ride, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they really enjoyed what they did for the club. They enjoyed what they brought to the table. So I think the downside to that, though, is that people feel we can feel comfortable as members.
Yes.
It's like, oh, well, so-and-so has this. And true, they were very good at it. They made it look seamless. And learning from that, though, is, okay, maybe we can balance that. We can balance that, whereby everyone has a sense of ownership and engagement as well.
Our club too, the Westford Club, engagement to me is the #1 goal for our members, to feel engaged, to be engaged and feel engaged. Some people are just awesome and they go and they just take off and they do everything. And some of us were ready to sit back and just let that happen. But I would love to see members engaged, and that's the goal. And then our other goal was efficiency, was more greater efficiency. I'm not an efficiency person at all, but I saw the benefits of making sure, like you said, that there was a plan. Everybody could do the back end and knew what's going on. Those resonate with me. Same.
Right.
Right. So those are great goals for the club itself. Were there service project goals or achievements that you wanted also to do?
So we were lucky that as a club, and again, it goes forth to show how much such a small group of people can do. We have really grounded service projects. To be honest, there was no need to reinvent that. We just had to reassign people and say, okay, so-and-so gave you the playbook for reality fair. Please take it on. What is it that we can do to support that, to bring it to reality, so to speak?
Right.
And don't be afraid to put your spin on it. Don't be afraid to make it your own. Okay. And then also we had, for the most part, we did not add so many projects. We kept the Veterans Day lunch. We kept the Veterans, Mary Garcia does the Pets for Vets, and we kept that. And again, because people were so good at keeping notes and keeping some form of structure, how these service projects operated, those were easier to really jump in. For example, one of our members, Cindy Orson, who had started as a visiting member, and then over time, actually, we inducted her last year. She was able to jump in right away and say, hey, I will lead Rise Against Hunger. And they did a spectacular job. Some of our 2 new members, Karen and Brad, jumped in and took on Purple Pinky Day. And we raised the most amount of money last year than any year. So in terms of service projects, to be honest, because we had so many changes, we just kept what we had And we just made sure that we delivered in a very efficient way. There are some things that we had to take off, but they were just appropriately so. We no longer use masks. So the Million Mask initiative has pretty much completed everywhere. So we had to scratch that as well.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you did quite a few service projects, and with a 20 people club, that's an impressive
Very nice.
list. Let me take you back and talk some more about succession planning. And, when did you recruit a president-elect? When did you recruit a vice president to follow that person? And how does that team work together, or do they?
So to follow, my year was a little bit rough in terms of recruiting. And again, to kind of remind you a little bit of how much changes we had and the confusion that brought itself. I was actually inducted without a president-elect, and it was probably the first time ever. But again, Chris was generous to say, hey, and I was like, I need you to be president-elect. And it worked. Yes, did I use my kids? Perhaps, but it worked, and she did accept. And we learned from that. We learned that, and again, speaking of succession planning and engagement, they go hand in hand. Because one of the barriers that I faced, people were like, okay, but what does that role entail? And I'm like, this is what it entails. Well, what else? Can I have a document about it? It's like, well, can you go to Club Rana and get that information, right? But by having engaged people who already know what the machine is like in the back end, it's a lot easier for people to see themselves in those roles. So for Chris's leadership team, things just fell in. People volunteered left and right. And by the time she was
did you create job descriptions to help people understand what roles they were signing up for?
Right. So we took the articles and pretty much also brought in what the role descriptions from
the Constitution and the bylaws.
Yes, from the bylaws, as well as RI's role definition, kind of simplified it and unpacked all of that heavy language to make it relatable and say, okay, this is what you do. But remember, we are all here. Please, I was the number one delegator. It came to a point, I was like, Chris, you're running this meeting. And say, okay. Like, I think also living by that example, that just because you are the president, it doesn't mean the club should rest on your shoulders.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
So learning to delegate is one important factor in a president.
Yes, learning to delegate and delegate appropriately. Also taking the time to know the skill sets of your members goes a very, very, very long way.
Right. So at what point did you get your president-elect named and so forth? Were you able to do that by December, say, or January?
Actually, I was able to get that done by July. By mid-July, she said yes. And I think by the second board meeting, we were able to induct her and swear her in. And again, I promised her, I said, we're going to work so closely together. You will not even know the difference between who is president-elect, who is president. And I kept my promise. I said, hey, why don't we have more frequent meetings and we learn together. The things that we don't know, we learn together. The things that I have access to knowing, I share with you. How about that for a plan? And she was very, very open to that. And we did have those frequent meetings initially. And the good news is, again, learning the skill set for your members really, really helps, because Chris had had been in corporate America, run teams across the globe. So really helping her understand just where do you find this, where do you find this, where do you find that, was really the only thing, because she's very, very attentive to detail, which I'm not. So we kind of complemented each other
That's awesome.
in a way. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you also using her as a live backup. So you said you had her running a meeting or two once in a while. I think one of the things that I valued when I was president was having that team of the previous president and the future president, that we could work together, and if one of us was out of town on business or something, that one of the others could step in relatively seamlessly.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you're right, knowing that I travel
Right.
quite a bit, Chris is there or Glenn is there, that really was comforting in a way.
Right. And I think we, from the district's perspective, we really recommend that people have a president-elect as soon as possible, no later than November, but July is even better. And so that was great, because we began communicating with the presidents-elect in December and January, getting them ready to go to the Northeast Pets President-elect Training Seminar. And we can't communicate with them if we don't know who they are. So so it becomes one of those communications issues with the district and RI as well.
We mentioned earlier that we questioned beforehand the best ways to communicate with your members, given their use or not use of computer services or texting. So what have you found works best for you, Susan?
For me, the simpler the modality of communication, the better.
Yes, I agree.
So,
right. So if you have a communication that you want to send out to each of the members, so this, what they call a one-to-many communication, the Club Runner is a good vehicle for that. But you were mentioning before that you also found a usefulness in having a Google group where people can really interact with one another.
Right. And for those it worked for, absolutely. The Google group was phenomenal, and it continues to be phenomenal.
Yeah, when you get a Club Runner message, you can only reply to the sender. You can't reply to everybody else. And
yes.
That's one of the things that some people find frustrating. But on the other hand, when you have a group, somebody has to sort of monitor it. You remember the concept of having a sergeant at arms. The sergeant at arms would say, "Okay, guys, sit down."
Enough. Time out.
But in an online group, you do sometimes wind up with those kinds of behaviors. And so having a group discussion is a joy and a frustration, and sometimes takes a little policing.
Right. I agree with you. And but we were lucky that, I don't know why, but our team, our club just reined in all of that. And again, don't be afraid to say, hey, can we take this on one-to-one?
Do you do a newsletter also, or do you do a kind of a regular communication?
So I did a bulletin.
A bulletin.
Yes, I did a bulletin, and I found that, and Chris has actually continued on with it, but I said, hey, this is your presidency. If this, whatever you want to put in it, is up to you. For me, I found it effective in terms of communication. And like I said, sometimes the emails are too many that it's very easy to just become numb to them. But if I saw something and it's like, okay, I'll pull that, I'll throw it in the bulletin. And I did get feedback that they really loved the bulletin. They were looking forward to it because it was quite concise. It was like getting all the news and putting it in one. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there were times I sent it out at midnight. when the meeting is tomorrow. What a year for sure. But it was such a year full of growth, full of opportunities for growth, certainly. And pivoting whichever way, and being nimble quite helped me and my family quite a bit. We started off the year traveling to Africa on a healing journey, so to speak, my kids and I. So the nonprofit that I founded, we do work in the African diaspora in the New England area, but we also do work in Uganda as well as Zambia. So I always made 2 or 3 trips a year. I'm yet to go this year to just go work with the national coordinators, the directors, to make sure things are what they're supposed to be. So this time around, I brought my kids with me, and we started off in Uganda. Of course, we visited several Rotary clubs and we had fun, and we went to Zambia. Unbeknownst to us, the RI president was in Zambia, actually arrived the same day that we arrived. And I kid you not, like, we stayed at a hotel that we didn't even know she was going to be there. So we ended up interacting quite a bit every day, and the team from Chicago. So that was also energizing just for my kids to see that. But also we visited other Rotary clubs in Zambia as well, in terms of cultivating relationships intentionally to be able to work together. They do it so big. They are very formal in a very beautiful way. And I was like, this is intimidating, you know? But it was nice to see the variations. Of course, the well-funded upscale clubs, as well as the clubs on the other end of the spectrum. The goal is really the same at the end of the day. But to see people find meaning in what they're doing and really flourish, really enjoy and see the fruits that Rotary International brings in these communities. That was energizing. It was quite enlightening, but also encouraging at the same time.
Okay. I hope they visit you. I hope they come.
I hope so. I have
club as
invited
well.
them. I have invited them only if they can get the visas, I guess. But
Yes.
yeah.
Before I know we set aside a certain amount of time. Would you talk a little bit about recruiting members? Because it sounds like you've had a change in your membership. And how do you attract, how have you been attracting new members?
And you know what? Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I really had time to reflect now that I have a little bit of time on my schedule, and I'm wondering, how come these people who have been visiting for so long finally made the switch to become active members? What is it that we did that made them say, this is what the time?
Don't you think too that people get attracted to energy? That you might have been exhibiting a big change in energy in terms of your club. And could that have been a factor as well?
It could, absolutely. That could also be the secret sauce in a way.
Sauce. I think it's the secret sauce. Yes, I do.
Yeah, that could also be the secret sauce.
So is there something in particular you would want to say to someone who's embarking on this journey of becoming a president of a Rotary Club for the first time?
I would say the same thing that I say because of my nursing background. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. There are so many learning opportunities, and the room for growth is immense. And remember, if no one dies, it can be fixed.
Right.
I love it.
The only thing we can't bring back is a life. Anything else can be fixed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, thank you so much. And Mary, thank you as always.
It was a pleasure.
Delighted to have you with us. And thanks to everyone for being with us. And we hope you'll join us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Have a lovely day.
Bye, Susan.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.